Ghouls and Gals, and welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, hi, my name is Hillary, and if you are a returning subscriber, then you must be a crazy hilly, and welcome back. I have something really special in store for you guys, because tonight is going to be a collab by fellow YouTubers. They have their own channel called Dan and Kay. I'm gonna leave their link down in the description if you guys want to go check it out. They're great, they're fun, they're amazing, and they're gonna be reacting to a ghost story that I'm going to be telling you because they're skeptics. So let's see if we can freak them out. Also, they're gonna have a video on their channel and I'm gonna be reacting to some of their ghost stories. So if you guys want to go on over and give them a like, feel free to do so. But after this video, don't leave like mid-video. Go once this one's done. So tonight I figured, because you know, I'm from Canada, that I'd find a Canadian ghost story. And we have quite a few, but one of my favorite places in all of Canada is Niagara on the Lake. It is one of the most haunted towns in all of Ontario, and it has been, a lot of stuff has happened there. The whole town has burned down. It was a main town in the War of 1812, so a lot of stuff happened with that, and it's a really cute, quaint little village. If you walk down, it's kind of like a one-road street with a bunch of cute houses, but each one of these houses, for the most part, has a ghost story. So I figured I'm gonna pull out my book. So this book is called The Ghosts of Niagara on the Lake, and it's a compilation of all of the ghost stories that have taken place there. So I've got one in store for you. I'm gonna read it to you, and hopefully you guys are a little creeped out. So let's get right on into it. Now, I've been to this town many, many times, and I've actually been to the place that I'm gonna be reading. It was very brief though, so I haven't felt any weird ghostly experiences there, but the place that I'm going to be reading about is called the Buttery. In the book, currently it is now called Corks. It is a restaurant in Niagara on the Lake. The Buttery is one of the oldest and most popular restaurants in Niagara on the Lake. The ground floor is home to traditional English-style eatery with a pub-style menu, while the second floor boasts the medieval King Henry Dinner Theatre, where patrons enjoy fine meal while being entertained by actors and musicians in 15th century costumes. For 35 years now, the Buttery has been a fixture in the town, beloved by locals and tourists alike. Few realize that long before it became a well-known restaurant it is today, the building was the site of a horrible tragedy that left 2 dead during a murderous rampage. Ghostly entities from the night of the violence and terror are embedded within the walls, like bloodstains, their spirits tormented by bitter memories and the violent manner in which they perished. Some people who dine within the Buttery can sense echoes of that terrible day in 1850. A select few people leave having seen apparitions intent on revisiting their past within the cozy confines of the atmospheric restaurant. In 1850, the home of Lloyd and Kate Byrne stood upon the site, but it was complicated and far from a happy household. They had courted in the manner of the day, meeting under the watchful eyes of the elders, with Lloyd pursuing in a courteous manner and Kate remaining proper and somewhat aloof. Eventually, Kate came around to the notion of marrying Lloyd. Truth be told, she had few options. Her parents were dead, and a young woman in those days had few prospects for the taking. But before they became husband and wife, one little detail had to be resolved. Who would look after her brother, Philip, a sick young man with a mental disorder? Kate couldn't leave him to fend for himself, so she stipulated that she would marry Lloyd only if Philip could come and live with them. Lloyd accepted the terms, but he too had a condition. Philip could join them in the house as long as he stayed in the basement under lock and key. The strange and cruel arrangement was made because Philip was schizophrenic and prone to seizures, a condition that in the 19th century would be considered embarrassing at best, and in extreme cases a sign of demonic possession. Most people with such an illness would have been confined to the harsh and depressing asylums of the day, where patients were locked up like animals and treated worse. Kate couldn't bring herself to send Philip to such a barbarous place, so she accepted Lloyd's terms. Though unusual, the arrangement seemed to work. When the newlyweds began their life as husband and wife, Lloyd and Kate settled into married life easily. If Lloyd could sometimes be demanding and abusive, Kate was at least content with the security that came with living with a husband, and knowing she would be near at hand if her brother took ill. But whereas Lloyd and Kate were satisfied with the direction of their lives were taking, Philip was not. This was not a way to treat a human being, he thought, and with each passing day he grew more and more restless, locked in a room. A prison, really, in a cold, dark cellar. One occasion, Kate, the loving sister, would convince her husband to let Philip out and join them in the main house. But such brief tastes of normalcy only tormented Philip more. He craved freedom to experience things beyond those four walls. The burn house was unassuming and modest for a young couple starting out. It was more than they needed, and even big enough to start a family if they would so choose to. Architecturally, it was a little different from most of the homes in 1850s Niagara-on-the-Lake, and yet it stood out, gaining a dark reputation due to the strange occupants. To townsfolk, having an adult living under lock and key seemed abnormal, and the mysterious basement dweller, only ever seen fleetingly through drawn curtains on rare occasions when he was allowed to leave the basement, became the subject of wildly imaginative stories and whispered innuendo. But strange though the arrangement might have been for the members of the Byrne household, that was the only way they could be happy under one roof. One day Philip somehow managed to free himself from the locked basement. He was in a delusional state when he escaped, his judgment clouded by schizophrenic seizure that turned a normally peaceful young man into a force of pure rage. He met his sister carrying a bowl of soup up to Lloyd on the staircase and lashed out at her. The hot soup spilled all over her abdomen and legs, scalding Kate and causing her to scream in agony. The shrieking rage mercilessly within Philip's skull intensifying. The thunderous headache that had assailed him during these seizures in pain, and startled by screams, Philip unthinkingly pushed his sister away. He hadn't meant to hurt her, but she tumbled down the stairs, and her body crumpled at the bottom. Kate lay clutching her stomach, tears streaming down her face, as she began to pray for the child just now growing inside her. Only moments before, she had been excited by the prospect of becoming a mother, and was looking forward to revealing the happy secret to her husband and brother. Now all she could do was cry, and between bouts of pain, pray for her baby. Seeing his sister twisted at the bottom of the stairs and hearing her pitiful cries, it enraged Philip to the brink of insanity. He turned his anger towards his brother-in-law. In his delusional mind, Lloyd was to blame. He should have let Philip live like a normal human, instead of imprisoned in the basement, where his seething resentment led to his violent eruption. Now, because of Lloyd and his inhumanity, Philip had hurt the only person who really loved and cared for him. For that, he would get revenge. Reaching for a knife, Philip began the climb up the stairs. With each step, his rage grew. His thoughts were for his sister lying near death on the cold basement floor. Fear and sorrow fueled his murderous impulses. Lloyd had been barricaded in his room, a large dresser up against the door, but Philip could not be stopped. Wood splintered as he stormed through the door, and then he came face to face with his brother-in-law. Nothing was held back. Lloyd had taken everything from him, his sister, his freedom, his sanity. He had to pay. Like a wounded animal, Philip was relentless in his assault. He drove the knife into Lloyd's flesh time and time again until his brother-in-law no longer stood in front of him, but had fallen bloody and lifeless to the floor. His rage abating, Philip returned to his sister's side. By this time, Kate was barely alive, and her eyes closed as if asleep. He held her in his arms and took her hand. It was warm to the touch, and he covered it with his own, gently cradling her tiny hand. Kate turned her head his way. Her eyes fluttered under the lids, and she moaned softly. When her eyes opened, they were dull and lifeless. She tried to focus, found Philip's face, and smiled faintly. "I'm going to have a baby, Philip," she whispered. "You're an uncle. We'll be a happy family, and if Lloyd can't change, you and I are going to leave and start anew." Then she gasped, and the spark of life that was suddenly extinguished from her eyes. Philip begged her not to leave him, but while she would have done anything for her brother, she could not resist the call of death. Philip panicked. He ripped up the floorboards from the basement, dug a pair of hasty graves in the hard-packed earth, and buried Kate and Lloyd. He sat by the graves, unsure of what to do next. For the first time in his life, he was alone. The grieving young man couldn't bring himself to leave Kate's side, and still hadn't moved 2 days later when he was struck by a massive seizure. He collapsed in convulsions and died next to his beloved sister. There are many people who believe that something of Kate and Philip have remained behind. It wasn't long after talk of the tragic events of 1850 finally began to die down, and people began noticing strange noises coming from the building. In the middle of the night, these unusual sounds continue to this day. ghostly whispers are regularly heard throughout the building, and on at least one occasion, staff have heard the sickening noise of someone falling down the stairs, only to find no one laying at the base. Others speak of quiet sobbing in the dark corners of the basement, or long agonizing moans upstairs where Lloyd met his grisly and painful end. Quotes. We came here 35 years ago and purchased the building, then a tavern known as the Thistle and Shamrock, explains owner Margaret Neiman. The present building sits on the foundations of the 1850s home, which had burned down, and while it's not particularly old, it was designed to look colonial and fit in with the historical character of Niagara on the lake. We didn't know anything about the ghosts when we bought the building, but we soon began to get an idea something unusual was going on. The ghosts made their presence known gradually, slowly building up intensity and frequency over their paranormal activity. At first, it amounted to an inexplicable noise here and a shadow moving there, but soon the activity became more obvious and more unsettling. And for the new proprietors, we started to hear noises like music and talking coming from upstairs. My husband would tear upstairs, but there was never anyone there. It went on like this for a while before I finally asked the previous owner about it. Margaret explains, she wasn't all that surprised and was wondering when I would get around to asking her about the ghosts. In fact, the noises we were experiencing were minor compared to what she went through. Some nights, even with the pub full of customers, a terrible banging could be heard from upstairs. It was so bad that she was sure she was going to lose all her customers. There was never an explanation, and the building inspectors couldn't find anything wrong that would cause the noises. That was just the first in what would be a continuous stream of spiritual activity that continues to this very day. Staff members insist they routinely feel watched by unseen eyes and see shadowy figures moving about in the corner of their vision. The upstairs banquet hall, where the King Henry VIII Theatre plays out its hotspot for the Buttery's paranormal phenomena, lights turn on and off by themselves. The doors to the dumbwaiter will open of their own accord. Furniture is moved by unseen hands, and sometimes after that, the lights will turn off for the night. Staff members trip over chairs that somehow find themselves pulled away from the tables and into their path. Even those who are skeptical about the existence, that's you guys, of ghosts, occasionally find themselves looking over their shoulders when alone on the second floor, feeling as if someone or something was standing behind them. One night, a staff member found herself cleaning up after the performance of a medieval dinner theater. She was alone upstairs, focusing on her task and completely unconcerned, when an invisible hand slapped her back hard enough to produce a yelp of pain. Terrified, she raced downstairs to the comfort of her co-workers. When her shirt was lifted, a large hand-shaped red welt was discovered imprinting in the soft skin of her back. No one could explain this violent outburst from the ghosts, who are generally mischievous but peaceful. Another time, 2 waitresses were folding napkins in the theater. They weren't up there long enough to finish the job when they came down white-faced, remembers Margaret Neiman. They saw a man dressed in old-fashioned clothes, who neither recognized, walk in one door and out the other without even opening them. He simply passed through the doors as if they didn't exist. Understandably, they were pretty shaken. The basement runs a close second only to the second floor when it comes to strange happenings. People report feeling uncomfortable down there, particularly in the men's bathroom, where the toilets will flush by themselves and disembodied male voices can be heard, as well as in the kitchen. Once, several people watched in terror as a plate floated off a pile of freshly washed dishes and flung itself across the room, shattering into pieces upon impact with the wall. On another occasion, Miss Neiman and her daughter saw a man in a green coat entering the basement cold room where the foodstuffs are stored. Following, they pulled open the heavy door, expecting to be confronted by a stranger. Instead, they found the room empty, as if the man had simply faded away. Everyone agrees the entity that haunts the Buttery's basement and theater is Philip. And as far as Miss Neiman is concerned, he's welcome to stay. Everyone likes Philip, and we always make sure to say goodnight to him. She says, I don't know what he did in his life, but he does no harm to us. Maybe he's trying to make up for what he did wrong in his life. Like her brother, Kate found little peace after her tragic death, her spirit lingering mostly within the staircase where she tumbled to her death. The lights in these stairs have been known to suddenly flicker and turn off, leaving waitstaff to grope their way through the darkness while balancing loaded trays. Other times, trays would be knocked out of their hands, spilling food and drink over the stairs. It's said that soup spills and burns are unusually common here. Even Miss Neiman suffered such an accident, badly scalding her legs. Most spectacularly, an elusive woman was occasionally spotted on the staircase. She wore old-fashioned dress, and there was an ethereal nature to her movements. Witnesses were left with no doubt that they had seen Kate, perhaps revealing the final moments before her fateful fall. It's uncertain whether the forlorn woman continues to linger within the walls of the Buttery. However, because in the early 1980s an exorcism was held that some believe allowed Kate to find peace, others are adamant that Kate has been sensed and sighted with some frequency in the 2 decades since. People who have witnessed the strange hauntings of Kate and Philip swear that both of their souls continue to exist within the walls of the Buttery to this day. The brother and sister who refuse to be parted in life remain united in death.